Okay, today we're going to talk about how the fact that your child is transgender is not the cause of the sadness or grief that you might be feeling since your child came out. And that's a big idea to think about, right? So, we've already talked about in the past, excuse me, how you can grieve and support your child, and how grief is a response to the loss of something. And what you've lost when your child comes out as transgender is the idea of something. It's the idea of the person who you thought that they were, right? So, my son came out as transgender in 2016, and what I lost was the idea of a daughter. And what I discovered after a lot of time had gone by, so probably 5 years, if we're being honest, was that what I was grieving was that I had been carrying a dream of having a daughter since I was a little girl. So I grew up in a family of brothers. And when I was 7, I had one last opportunity to have another sibling. And that sibling turned out to be another brother. And I was devastated by that. I was holding out hope for a sister, and I got another brother. And the last thing that I wanted in the entire world was one more brother, because I already had 3. Like, what did I need with one more brother? And growing up, I was so jealous of my brothers and the relationships that they had, and the fact that they had same sibling relationships with each other, and they could hang out with each other and share things with each other and play games and toys that were the same with each other. And I was jealous of my friends who had sisters and had that same kind of relationship, because I missed that. I didn't have that. It was just me and nobody else. And something, my brothers played with me. Like, they would trade. They would play with me with my things if I would in turn play with them with their things, which isn't the same as having like a same sibling to share in a relationship with. And so I decided when I was young sometime that was fine, because someday I was going to grow up and I was going to have a daughter, and that was it. And I didn't know at that time how having children worked, obviously, because I didn't know you could just not have a daughter if you wanted one. So eventually I grew older and I realized that the opportunity for me not to have a daughter did exist, but I still dreamed that I might have one someday. And in 1997, I gave birth to my son Leo, and that dream, I thought, came true. And so for 18 and a half years, I lived that dream. And then when Leo came out as transgender, that dream shattered. And I didn't know at the time, because I didn't know enough about what it meant to be transgender and what being a transgender person meant. I didn't know that Leo had always been transgender. I didn't know that for Leo's whole life, he was not my daughter. So when he first came out, I thought that I lost my daughter. And so that's what I thought that I was grieving and sad about. And so it took me probably the better part of a year, probably maybe a little bit longer than that. It may have been longer than a year, maybe almost 2. I would have to think more about it, to really realize that I never had a daughter. I had always had a son. I just didn't know. He didn't always know. But once he was able to tell me, that was it. Like, he was saying, Mom, this is who I am, and this is who I have always been. But that's not what I understood when he first came out. And so once I was able to understand that and understand that I never had a daughter, then the work became for me to be like, well, if what you're sad and grieving about is not the loss of your daughter, then what exactly is going on here? And so I was able to do the work, and it took a few more years because, doing the work is hard and takes a long time. Sometimes you have to sit in your pain and your sadness, and you have to travel through some more grief in order to get to where you're going. To be able to recognize that what I was actually grieving was the dream of having a daughter and how that dream had shattered. And it was a lot because I had carried that dream for such a long time, for so much of my life. And so it became abundantly clear to me once I realized that why I was so sad and why I had such a hard time, why the sorrow felt so heavy. Because it was why it was so hard for me to let go of that idea of having a daughter, because it didn't seem like it should be so hard. It didn't seem like it should be so hard to let go of that idea. And I thought, I should be able to have moved through this already. Until I realized, well, no, because you've been carrying this with you for a long time. It's like ingrained in who you are as a person. And now you have to do the work of letting it go. So your reason's going to be different than my reason. We don't all have the same reason for why we are carrying our sadness and for what we are grieving about the idea of our child being transgender. But rest assured, I can almost guarantee the fact that your child is transgender is not the thing that's causing you to be sad or to feel grief or sorrow or loss even. Something in your story has led you to that pain, and you just have to do the work to uncover it. And it may not be what you think initially. Like, I thought for me, it was the idea that I lost my daughter. And it turns out it wasn't. But thinking that was what led me to uncover where the pain point actually was. So I had to get there first so that I could go back further and uncover where the sadness was actually originating from. So you may have to journey a little bit further than you think, and it may take you several stops. You may get to several different places before you get to your destination. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. If you have been on this journey and you want to share where it's taken you, I'd love to hear about it. If you don't feel brave enough to share about it publicly, you could always send me a DM or an email. I'm happy to hear about it. And yeah, I thought that's what we'd talk about this week, because in 6 years, it probably took me 5 to get to this point, and even still, it's been probably in the past year that it's really solidified this idea of this is where we are and this is how we got there. So give yourself time and grace and don't rush it. Don't rush it. Okay, we'll talk more next week. Bye.